Welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and business valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. In this episode, we're going to be talking with Jose Berlanga, and he's a real estate investor, author, and speaker. He's located in Houston, Texas, and is a force of unwavering tenacity. Today, we're going to talk about hiring for impact and parallel leadership, which Anna kind of just created right now. And it's an interesting concept that we're going to talk about. But welcome, Jose. How are you?
Well, hello, Melissa. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
This is going to be a good conversation. I think it's going to be a little bit more free flowing than some of our other boring topics. No, just kidding. But it's going to have some
All of these
impact.
topics are fun.
Exactly. This is going to be, I guess, a little bit more on the softer side of the business. And it's an area that we've seen in business valuation experts, and really any sort of like high consulting, experienced consultants, anywhere in those professional practices. We're seeing individuals that aren't necessarily planning the next in line. So we're not necessarily doing a really good job at getting other people interested in our craft, or and getting those younger people interested. And today, I think we're talking about like employees and how they are impactful in running a successful business. And part of this was based on a discussion that we had about value. Like, what is valuable in a business in this day and age? It's people. And to further complicate or kind of, create the framework for this discussion, is this parallel leadership concept would be, are we really hiring employees, or are we trying to hire and partner with other leaders? And so I want to start you off with, like, tell us, what this impact and why we should be focused on people right now, because I don't know. I think we're getting distracted.
Yes. And there's so many angles to look at this from. But there's a contradiction in the meaning of being a leader and being an entrepreneur, because by nature we tend to want to take control. We tend to want to be stubborn, to take over the business, customize the business to our personal needs instead of to a market. And I've made this mistake many times over the years, to make the business about me rather than creating an infrastructure. Um, I believe I talk a lot about this, how we need to better distinguish the difference between a practice and a business, first of all, and how to start not creating a company that revolves around us, the owners. That's a mistake that a lot of us make. We find it very difficult. Obviously, to start and to build a business is extremely hard. It takes a lot of patience, effort, sacrifice. And when you start delegating, which is a word that I think it's used very freely, but it's a complicated thing to do, to pass on responsibilities. First of all, learning how to allocate them, who to allocate them, how much responsibility, the load of work that you can pass on to the different participants in your organization. And then we're going to talk about selecting those particular personalities for each one of those jobs in job descriptions. And even a very interesting subject, which is how to identify what drives each person within your organization, because not everybody's driven by money. Some people are driven by many other things, by being a part of something, by having a mission, titles, being important within your organization, providing value. Everybody has a different mission within their career. But getting back to the original point, which is a big mistake that we make, is to really make the business depend on us as the boss, as the owner. And when you start planning growth, a very, very important part that we forget is that when you initiate, when in the early stages of building and starting a business, everything revolves around you. And that's fine because you don't have budgets, you don't have employees. Every action that creates a reaction has to come from you. And you have to create and generate those results. But as your company grows and as you gradually start incorporating other people into the business, now, the results of your company and of your growth depend on not only your actions and your activities, but all of the different activities that occur within the different departments by each and every person that participates. So, how do I create that balance in paying attention to what everybody else is doing without burning out and micromanaging every little detail as they're occurring? So it's a very delicate balance as of passing on responsibilities. I remember pretty much, which particularly my expertise, my career has been not taking over large companies or running large companies, but has been starting companies from the ground up. So I'm very familiar from the perspective of starting by yourself when you're everything, and then you have a second person where I always say, well, when do you find that first initial employee, and what should they be in charge of? The answer is when you start having enough of any one type of activity, whether it's operations, production, sales, marketing, accounting, when one of those activities start becoming unbearable, where you could actually use a full-time person to just take over one area, because there's another mistake we make is to hire someone to do a lot of things. Horrible decision to hire someone to assist you in multiple areas of the business. Big mistake. That's how things start getting confusing in a business. You need to hire one person to do one type of activity, and it needs to be the one that starts growing the fastest, consuming so much of your time. But at the same time, it needs to be one of the activities that you dread doing yourself, that you're particularly not very good at and that you don't enjoy doing very much, so you can start enjoying your business a little more as you grow. So that's where the delegating begins. And when you start making those small steps of delegating, recommendation is to be extremely specific into what each and every person needs to be doing. The worst thing we can do is be vague in in giving someone accountability to do an array of things. It needs to be one area of the business with one specific task. So, anyway, those are the early beginning steps, and in little by little, you start separating and spreading. A company starts with one department, which is everything, and then operations and accounting, and then now you have this and you have that, and before you know it, something you and I have discussed about is the difference between being the center of your company, where everybody comes to me for questions, with emails, with problems, with issues, with drama, because that's a big part of running the show. There's always going to be an array of personalities. Um, Differentiating that, where you are the center of the activity, from starting to create your pyramid, layers of management, layers of distributing and allocating those responsibilities, where eventually, instead of creating, I've made the mistake of, the more I hire, the more people I need to attend to, the more time I need to address all the different issues, the more emails I get from everyone. And it took me a while to learn how to, although yes, you want to stay open, keep your door open to listen to everybody's needs within your company, but there also needs to be a system of communicating everything that goes on within the company, or you become very inefficient. So those are the initial steps, I would say.
Well, and I think that, what really resonated with me that you said, start with the one type of activity that you find unbearable. And I think that's really interesting. I think even to layer onto that is then, does that activity require a person or AI? Does that require an efficiency, a new program? And, like AI could just be in general, like a technology, should you now pay for the fancy Adobe because you're needing to do certain things? It's like you can also look at other resources, but I think that in general, um, you know, we're not we're not figuring out how to hire other leaders. And I know you said that this was kind of a term that we should talk about, because I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like the term teacher. I don't know if I like the term leader. I don't like, like, why are you instructing me? Like, you get to a certain point and you're like, if I know what I know in this space, I want to connect with other people that know what they know in their space. And I don't think we always do that with employees. Like, we just like, oh, we'll hire them to do these tasks. When in reality, like, I endeavor to hire like brilliant people in what they do, not just, and partner with them, not just hire, but partner. But you have a more defined way of looking at this. So what really defines what a leader is in today's work and environment? And is it our traditional, patriarchal capitalistic view, or are we seeing this kind of new leader emerge?
Yeah, particularly with technology that you can work from anywhere. It's more vital right now to have the right person for each one of the job descriptions within your company. And let me add that it took me a while to really understand this concept uh, of directing, of leading versus managing and micromanaging, because uh, that's just part of the nature of a business owner and a leader. You want to have your eyes and ears everywhere, and before you know it, you don't know what you're doing anymore. You're overwhelmed, you're confused, and the moment, and people get to the point where uh, they don't know how to act when you're not around. You're not allowing people to make educated decisions and to, yeah, make their own mistakes, and perhaps they're not going to do everything exactly the way you want, the way you expect, but that's how you learn. And you start by allocating activities that are the least dangerous within the business, where there's a little bit of margin of error, and it gives you some time to adjust and pivot and perfect the area. But let's go back before discussing the types of personalities and how to identify them with something that I now it's become a modern, a reality. And I think it became predominant even after the financial crisis of 2008. It became very, very popular as companies from small to public and everything in between had to lay off employees by the thousands and millions nationally. The concept of outsourcing became very big. Some companies never even got back to their levels of full-time employees after that, because having a full-time employee is a responsibility. It's an accountability that you have to absorb and understand and
Well,
differentiate.
even if I interrupt for a minute, you have all these big accounting firms, which a lot of our listeners are in big accounting firms that are have outsourced tremendous amounts of work to other countries, and never, and don't plan on bringing it back. Like, this is an efficiency right now, but it's just not your only option, right? It's like
Correct.
one of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're so right. Even big companies uh, uh, outsource some of their own in-house specialties. Some of the things that they do, they just can't handle them, and they get a little concerned, perhaps, about just loading up on employees, because now we understand that there's cycles and the economies change. And once you experience the pain of having to lay off, which I've done a number of times in different companies that I've owned, and it's very, very depressing, very difficult to start letting people go. You start getting smarter and more careful every time you add a single person to your organization. So when you make that decision, when you get to the point where there's so much work within one area of the business, where you're paying considerably more to an outside company than what you would pay a person. For example, at some point, maybe you need an in-house attorney. You need some legal advice, and you have enough legal activities, paperwork, documents, contracts that need to be reviewed. When yes, it makes sense now to bring in a person. Same goes for accounting. Same goes for all the different productions areas of a company. So what I always say is, the moment you're spending too much and where you can justify a person just to do that type of activity starts making sense, and it's got to be worth it. Even if you're paying a little more in outsourcing, sometimes it's smarter, because you have the flexibility. You pay a la carte. This is something else that, with once you bring on a full-time staff member, whether you have enough workload or not, you have that financial responsibility. But when you outsource it, you only pay for the work that you are required to do for each one of these activities. So there are pros and cons to outsourcing versus hiring, and there are several ways I think we can little by little identify when it makes sense. But the point is that you need to consider that there are some areas that you can make that choice. At some point, I can't handle them anymore. Do I hire a media person, an IT, someone in now that everything is computerized, or do I bring in somebody to handle that? So that's decision number one. In area number one is making that choice. But once and of course, selecting the right partner, the right company to outsource the service, doing the right research. Um, I've made so many mistakes in my career, and one of them, when a company experiences, which is a good thing, when you experience fast growth. If you're one of the lucky ones that at some point in any of your businesses you experience some aggressive growth, the your inability to deliver a product or a service to your consumers starts costing you money. So you start accelerating your process of hiring and training. I've done that in the past, where I've made the mistake of bringing in more people too fast, quick training, rushing the process. And before you know it, I don't know who's doing what. And we lack, even at some point you need a human resource department, and that department better operate well with the right philosophies uh, and the right procedures, because this is where the next subject takes us to, which is what we're discussing: how to identify those people and how to understand if I'm hiring someone to do small tasks that need management, or leaders that can operate on their own without you having to supervise them. um,
Well, and
I
Jose, like, I'm wondering if I should take you just in a slightly different direction, because this is something that you may not know about, like, business valuation world, but I think people, there are a lot less of us as experts, and so we are getting inundated with business. Like, everybody is busy. It's very hard to find somebody to do the work, and so the ability to deliver the products is getting difficult. And quite frankly, hiring somebody and training them, like, you're good at 5 years of experience. You're better at 10 years of experience, and you're really great getting to 15 and 20. I don't have that kind of bandwidth. So I am trying to partner with other people. Like, could we, because I know we're talking about outsourcing, but I'm like, just a little nuance in it, because you're our target audience would totally love this. Like, I'm wondering, how do I partner with other people that maybe want to run a full service valuation firm, but I don't want to do it, right? Because I think that more people are in that position, and that is outsourcing, but more like partner joint venture. I don't know. Can you I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was like, "Hey, maybe you could talk to some of this, because we are struggling with this issue a lot."
Oh, and one of the things that I think your listeners are going to agree with, and perhaps experience, is the balance between how much do I invest in an employee or a team member. Because you just mentioned something important. They start becoming more valuable, more capable, more knowledgeable about my business. and then they decide to leave with all of that world of experience that you invested in. So that's a double-edged sword in how to manage and balance. You have no idea how many people that have invested so much time and energy and effort only for them to eventually say, well, thank you so much, I'm going on. I thank you for training me on your nickel. Now I'm going to go and start my firm, which, by the way, I motivate everyone to go and be the best that they can be and start their own businesses. I've helped many people do that. But also you have to consider the interest of your own business and how much do you invest. And that's where outsourcing is important, and finding those important partners and qualified partners, because those, if you choose right, they're there for the long term. um, it employs people that work for you, which they also run the risk of getting fired if the economy changes and you have to lay off people. But you run that same risk if your business grows and they start doing well and they want to move on. You have to be ready to make those adjustments and find replacements. And that's always hard once you have someone that's valuable within your company. So that is something that I'm sure all of us, as we grow, experience the turnover. Um, and it really, really devoting enough time. I've I've hired people in a hurry, and I've made selections in a hurry. I tend to
Mhm.
do that because I operate by gut feeling instinct as an entrepreneur without really evaluating and analyzing a lot of details. And whenever you ask the right questions, make sure that the person enjoys, not it's not just taking a job for receiving a paycheck, but that is truly what they want to do. That is what they enjoy. That is what they're good at. They have the right organizational skills. They have the right attitude. They're self motivated, and there are a sequence of questions and actions that need to be taken before you hire and take on someone in your organization. So um, I do agree that in order for your business to start growing and developing, which it's a very interesting subject, how do you prepare your organization for a possible exit to eventually sell it, pass it on in one form or another? I think we battle with that idea. Once we build a business, it becomes our baby, it becomes part of our lives. And we struggle with the concept of letting go um, until it's absolutely necessary. But in order to be able to achieve that, you first of all, we have to consider the possibility that at some point our business will need to be passed on, and you better have something of value when that, if and when that occurs. Sometimes we're so busy working and making money that we don't really understand what's valuable within the business. It's happened to me when I've been ready to exit a company, only to realize that all of the components that make my business are not very sellable. you know, I don't have any intellectual rights. I don't have automation. I don't have something that it's easy to pass on for someone to continue the business. Because if I were to leave, for example, a surgeon, a dentist, an architect, those are practices that when you remove the surgeon, well, there's not much of a business left. You're it. And preparing for the future and considering the fact that at some point there's a possibility that you may want to sell or retire, you better think about what it is that I could possibly sell, because you don't want to just get out of your business after all these years and find out that, yeah, you made money throughout the process, but you weren't able to sell it or maximize the money that you could have gotten out of your business. And in order to do that, you start structuring from the get go. And some of the most fundamental things to do is, first of all, number one, always have very clean records, very clean accounting. Separate your I mean, just have perfect records, because this is perhaps the number one item that any buyer or any partner or any joint venture is going to begin their due diligence with: your profit, your numbers, your ratios. your assets and liabilities and all of the trends that your company has. And you'll be surprised how many business owners, very qualified professionals, have real messy books. They don't they don't categorize their expenses properly. Um, Even your own expenses, for example, that you could differentiate. Hey, if I wasn't here, these expenses wouldn't occur. Your own salaries, your own um, uh, 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 activities that revolve around you as the owner, where you can retract those and add profit to your company and give it more value. All of those are important to have as the initial step. But number two is to really have systems in place, to have manuals of operation, to have something that someone would be relatively um, simple to take over, where they wouldn't find it very, very complex to even understand. So, preparing those and considering it, and even thinking about it in early on when you're building your business is very important. So, not many of us think about it until the last minute, and it might be a little late for you to start organizing it where you actually have something to sell. So,
Well, and I think that's always, like that's where we struggled as a professional practice. I think that's where most people struggle. The concept of, well, I can charge $300 an hour and I can pay somebody else to do the work, for $50 an hour is always been the capitalistic concept. And the reality though is like if we train our people well, they should know that that's the concept. They should go out and do that as well, right? So I think we get into a situation of really, how do we monetize our intelligence in other ways? And, my first hire was marketing. And, how do you mechanize the first conversations in a video so that other people can be like, oh, I have all these same questions. And if I could just watch a video and then maybe somebody watches that video for 100 hours that month, and that's 100 hours that I didn't spend on answering those same questions that everybody had to only say, oh, I can't afford it, or, oh, it's not the right fit, and we spend a lot of time in areas that maybe are not as beneficial, but, as valuation professionals, we're not building these automations. We're not utilizing what we have currently, which is AI and other types of resources to, create books, to create training, to create programs that have longevity, that we're not in the room. Like if we don't stop exchanging dollars for hours, we're not going to have a professional practice and people to hire. So in some respects, it's almost like you have to focus on hiring people or partnering people or working with people that have like superpowers that are different than yours, that are like complementary, that, and we've talked about some of the ways that it's important to focus, on hiring leaders rather than just employees. But what if the market is so tight? Like right now, anybody who has like 5 to 10 years of experience in business valuation, you can write your ticket. You can go to any firm in the country and say, you're going to pay me this amount. And the odds are they're going to pay that because there's not enough people in that space to fulfill the needs to just go out and hire. It's not. And then, you know, they're not going to be in your area. You're going to
yeah.
have to have some sort of remote situation, and people are very uncomfortable. People are still very uncomfortable with that concept. So what should they be focused on?
And I, by the way, I've always been a proponent of hiring someone that is hungry, willing to do what it takes, willing to put the hours, the time, the effort, that's highly organized, that's highly efficient, over someone very experienced, because you can earn the experience, you can learn the business, but it's harder to teach someone to be organized and efficient. So I don't get so worried about necessarily finding someone with a lot of experience. I get more concerned about hiring someone with the right characteristics for the job. That is much more important. And you nailed it. Having people, we don't understand as business owners that we can't do it all. We cannot be experts at everything. And we need to rely on people that understand their job, that are good at it, that enjoy those particular activities, that can supplement and complement our weaknesses. One of our jobs as leaders is not to pat ourselves on the back and focus so much on what we're good at, but really to identify our weaknesses. I'm very good at that, by the way. I spend so much time understanding what is it that I'm terrible at, what is it that I don't enjoy, what type of activities annoy me, and then I try to figure out how to hand those over and find the right person for the job. But not just by filling in the blanks, but by finding someone who actually loves doing that. So that is, and in understanding the value, what business are
But
you
why
in?
do we have such an easy time to do it like in our life? Like I had a no problem calling somebody to pull the weeds in the garden and no problem to call somebody to deliver my groceries. But when I'm in my business, why can't like what's the psychology that we can break that we're not trusting? Like, is this because, in the money world, and that's where a lot of us are in this consulting world, like money equals trust. Are we just not in a trustworthy? Are we, is society and the state of the world making us not trust people, or is it a different issue?
No, no. I mean, it's very natural for us to have gotten to a point where you actually own a business, or that you went on your own and took all kinds of risks,
Yeah.
sacrifices, where you're just not willing to put them in somebody else's hands. Think of it
Mhm.
as your baby, your newborn. Would you just hand them over to someone to cross the street, or let them take them to school, or daycare? You kind of want to be the one to watch over these things, because it would just be too painful for something to go wrong. This is where the difficulty is. Not that it's difficult finding someone, is that in our brains we don't consider very many people that are able or qualified to do the job the same way we would do it. You wouldn't hand your children just to anyone and go on a vacation and assume that everything is going to be fine. And we underestimate the psychological, the emotional value that a business has to us, because we went through such a tough journey to get to where we are, that we cannot even imagine the possibility or the probability for someone making a fatal mistake that is going to cost me my business. And not to put down anybody in the team within an organization, but they can always, like you said, they can always go and get another job and continue their life. But you cannot just go and start another business overnight. That is a much more complex proposition. So you have a lot more to lose as an owner, as a leader, than the people that you hire. And that's why we are terrified, and we don't trust anyone, and we don't think that anyone is able or capable of doing it. So you have to do it with baby steps. That's why I do not believe in just giving responsibilities that are vague. Here's, and I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I don't want many people in my organization to have too much of a thinking process within their activities, or too much um, common sense that needs to be applied. I want my team members to have repetition in what they do. I want to hand over responsibilities that I've done before, and that they can be repetitive and they can take ownership of those. But when you pass on responsibilities that require a lot of decision um, making, and that sometimes they go in different directions, starts confusing your team. So you want to hand over responsibilities that are very self-explanatory, yes, are difficult to execute, and they require responsible people to show up and to be there and to attend to them, but they don't require a lot of imagination or a lot of creativity, because that's when things start getting confusing. You should be the only one creating and inventing and innovating, but others need to be executing for you. So once you master that and differentiate those two, I think you can start finding people that can help you. There are responsible people out there that that can take over. But I agree with you. It's hard delegating. Uh, Everybody thinks that it's just easier said than done. In particularly when you're passing on something that is so meaningful to you, it's not an easy step.
Okay, so I got a question for you. This might make your brain think a little bit. Let's say there are a fair amount of entrepreneurs and business owners that start a business basically because they're not great employees, right? They don't want to work for somebody. They don't want somebody to boss them around. They want to make their own hours. They want to work from home, work from the field, do it their way. Sometimes we call them lifestyle businesses, that they create a wage, they create a little bit more, like maybe you can make 300,000 or 500,000, like you can make it exponential, but essentially they're heavily reliant upon, a unique thing in that particular owner, that they've just cracked the code for something unique. Now, that leads us to an interesting question in the business valuation world and the M&A world, which is every business saleable? Can you sell any practice? Because what you're endeavoring to say is that if you're a solo entrepreneur and you build it, they will come. So, and a lot of people who are in as entrepreneurs or in these lifestyle businesses, they're like, this business doesn't exist without me. It's worth nothing without me. And how do we, is every business sellable, or are there ones that are so highly attached to the owner that you can't take it away, right?
Yeah,